Free Your Inner Guru is a listener-supported show. Supporting the podcast is also designed to support you by keeping the episodes free of ads, but also with rewards for your donation like the Free Your Inner Guru guidebook, a private listener forum, and live monthly Q&A sessions. To become a supporting member, you can visit patreon.com/Free Your Inner Guru. Welcome to the Free Your Inner Guru podcast. I'm your host, Laura Tucker. Today's episode is an interview with Ivanka Siolkowsky. Ivanka is a former elementary school teacher whose life was transformed when she began learning the many benefits of minimalism and organization. At a time when she was struggling with her mental health, Ivanka was given Marie Kondo's book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, as a joke present. Reading it led her on a journey of exploration of the relationship between decluttering and mental health. Ivanka is now a KonMari certified professional organizer who brings compassion and insight into her clients' homes. Enjoy this interview where we talk all things environment, decluttering, and share the story of each of our journeys from the classroom into our respective purpose-built businesses. Welcome to Free Your Inner Guru, Ivanka. I'm so excited about this juicy conversation that we are going to have.
Oh, me too. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, Ivanka, we were just talking before we got on here about a number of areas that we can explore together. And we have some common background experience, which is uncanny and probably suitable. So I would love for the audience here to be all curious about what that is. And maybe you could take us into your story of how you became a professional organizer and your association with Marie Kondo and all that. But even depending on how you want to weave it, I'd love to hear about your days as a teacher, because that's what we share.
Yes, definitely. So it actually all started around the time that I was a teacher, because I was going through some mental health struggles, and I realized that, I wasn't able to control my own thoughts, having been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and OCD, actually, all in a short amount of time. And, as a human, you want to be able to control some aspect of your life. And when you're not able to control your thoughts, there aren't really many other options. So when I realized that the only option I had was to control my outer surroundings in order to bring myself peace, I started doing that in my home. And then I started implementing that in my classroom as well, which was turning out to be great for a lot of my students who were suffering from anxiety, and even those who weren't. I was seeing the correlation between organization and developmental growth, which was such a phenomenal thing to see.
What age did you teach so that we can kind of tune into that developmental stage that the bulk of your students would have been at?
Yeah, so I was teaching at the time that I realized this. I was teaching a grade 7 and 8 split with 33 students. And then from there, I taught grade 5 for a few years. So those were the age groups that I was seeing benefiting from this minimalistic approach to the classroom, not having a lot of posters on the wall. And don't get me wrong, my first year of teaching, I was that teacher who bought it all. I thought, this is what you have to do. You have to have posters everywhere, say this, that, the other thing, and decorations. And like my first year classroom was a disaster. Looking back, I kind of laugh at myself. But near the end of my teaching career, but right before I received information about Marie Kondo, my classroom was night and day from that first year. And it was, not a lot of things on the walls, not a lot of things on my desk. My desk only had what I was working on. And then at the end of the day, it went away. And same with my students. We didn't have, old lunches at the back of their desks or hiding in their lockers. We cleaned those out all the time. And it was a routine that we implemented on a daily basis. And it was a calming, safe environment for not only myself, but my students. And they talked about that all the time. And even the staff talked and joked about it. Let's go eat lunch in Ivanka's room because we can eat off the floor. And it got to a point where the joke went so far as someone giving me Marie Kondo's book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, as a joke, saying, "Oh, I saw this book at the bookstore. It made me think of you. Haha." And so I read it because it was a free book. And then in my moments of Googling who this woman was and what her story was, she opened the first ever course of organization. And it was in New York. And so I thought, oh, that's about an hour flight from Niagara, where I'm originally from. And I thought, I'll be home for the summer. I could do this because I was living in Saskatoon at the time, in Alberta at the time. And so I signed up, and the rest is kind of history. I went to the course, I fell in love, and in a way, I'm still teaching. I'm just not teaching in the traditional classroom sense, but I work a lot with families and with students and children in their spaces, and helping people just kind of go through their daily life and find what's holding them back from living the life they want to be living, and then taking that and eliminating the roadblocks to help them move forward and just live a joyful existence.
And so in the work that you're doing, it sounds to me like you're bringing that same sense of routine and structure, or at least introducing it into the environment, because you don't stay with them for 10 months out of the calendar year like you would have with your grade 5s and 7s and 8s.
Correct.
But what I love about this is that even before somebody gave you that book, that's what you had become known for. You had gone through that transformation of your own accord and for your own wellness and sense of well-being. Would you say that's a fair statement to make?
I would say it's a very fair statement. I mean, at the time, my life literally depended on it. I had an attempt of suicide, and I was in the hospital, and, my life as I knew it was over, waking up on the floor and saying, great, like I can now add suicide to my long list of life's failures, wasn't exactly, it's funny because it wasn't a wonderful moment, but looking back, it was the most wonderful moment, because that was the beginning of everything. When you've hit rock bottom and even gone further down, there's really only one way, and that's up.
Are you comfortable talking about that a little bit further, as far as, when things changed for you, or what that all meant for you in your journey?
Sure, definitely. I think talking about it is very important, because when I was first diagnosed in 2004, no one talked about it. And I think this is why I struggled as long as I did. And, it was just, Ivanka, don't stop being a baby, stop being a whiner, stop being sad, just be happy, brush it off. Like all those silly cliche things that people say, it's all in your head, just get over it. That actually makes a person worse. And so talking about it now, I do a lot of public talks about mental health and the correlation between, having a decluttered space and finding your own inner peace and sense of Zen, because I really believe that it works, because it's worked for me. Like I couldn't have been worse off in my life than I was. And now I'm in a totally different place. And it's not because of medications and being pumped with drugs and things like that. And because I've done so many different treatments, some that didn't even make it to market because I was a guinea pig. And a lot of it involved drugs. And I'm not saying that drugs do not work. I'm saying for me, they did not. I tried many combinations. I know that for a lot of people, they do work. And that is a blessing, because if it's as simple as, popping a pill every day and you're fine, then that's great. I say go for it. For me, it wasn't working. I was always either very tired, or I was nauseous all the time, or passing out, or physically actually throwing up. And I thought, well, this isn't a life either. And that made me more depressed. And so, when I'm having a rough day, I can come home to my home, and my house isn't perfect. I live life. I go through rough days where, I had a long day. I throw my clothes on the floor just like anyone else. But the beauty of this system is that I can take 2 minutes out of every day if I'm having a rough day and put it all away. Everything has a home. There's order in my home. There's a routine that helps me get through the tough stuff, which I didn't think existed in this world. So, if there are people who are struggling and meds aren't working, I would highly recommend just trying it out, getting rid of stuff, because in society today, we are kind of hammered with consumerism. especially in the social media world. Buy this and you'll be happy. Get this and you'll get these results. And even though we know deep down it's not true, we do it. We fall for it. And I think it wasn't until I started, because I used to be an emotional shopper, bad day, go buy something. Sad day, go buy something. Happy day, go buy something. It was any emotion I was feeling, I would just go buy something. And that was physically and emotionally and mentally weighing me down. Once I started getting rid of that and started practicing minimalism, it was like my world completely changed. And I feel like a physical weight has been lifted off my body and my mind.
When we were having our preparation call for this interview, I shared with you something that longtime listeners of the show and people who know me and my work, they will be resonating already, because I've been known to say over and over again that environment always wins. Mm-hmm. And what you're describing really aligns with that, especially in the physical environment. But since everything is interconnected, it's not much of a stretch to say that what you do in your physical environment influences your mental environment. So thank you for sharing that, because you have such a powerful story around it from lived experience. When you found Marie Kondo and her work, what was that like for you? Did you gobble it all up because it was in tune? Did you find that you still bring your own approach? Her work I got the book when it came out because of my interest in environment, and read it and set it aside. It's still on my shelf, but there's been a resurgence with the Netflix show Tidying Up. So, yes, seeing her and her approach is more accessible than ever. And I'm wondering, what aspect of you do you bring into the work, and how do you make it your own, or do you? Is it a system that is so reliable that this is what you advocate?
It's funny, because what I loved about the book is I laughed at almost every third page, because those were already things that I was doing. So she wrote this book, but she admits in the very first beginnings of the book, first couple of pages, that this book these aren't all her ideas. She researched a bunch of different ideas, and she just compiled a bunch of the best ones in her mind. So things like shoe boxes and drawers to organize your belongings. I mean, we did that. My mother did that for us when we were children. We didn't grow up in a family that, could afford $3 a box to go for, Container Store. Let's go. There were 3 kids. We had other priorities. And so, but my mother was very organized, and she taught us that. So different things like putting a shoebox in a drawer to organize your underwear. It made me giggle, because as a teenager, my mother would do it, and I'd be a teenager like, Ma, like, it's so embarrassing. What are you doing? And not that anyone was seeing this, but that's how teenagers react. And
no,
things like,
they don't.
Yeah, it's true story. I was the worst. I'll admit it. Which is why I love working with teenagers now in the home. I love working with teenagers, because I know I was the worst one, and now I can see there's a light at the end of the tunnel there. But yeah, a lot of what she wrote in the book were things that I was already doing. There were things I did not know about the folding. The folding was probably the most mind-blowing thing for me. Folding in thirds and stacking things vertically so that you can see everything. Like I don't know how I had never seen this before, but doing that and the folding of the socks, that was probably the most mind-blowing thing of anything. And I loved her framing of, we're not talking about what we want to get rid of from our lives, because that has a negative connotation. It's already like we're talking about removing things from our lives that's negative. She's talking about putting the focus on what you want to keep. What are the things you want to surround yourself with? The whole spark joy phrase, like people laugh at that wording, but I mean, it is. Does it spark joy? Do you feel this sense of, oh my gosh, I can't wait to, wear this again or use this again or what have you? And that change of mindset really, really helped me, because I was always thinking about what can I get rid of to make my life easier? But instead, I should have been focusing on what should I be keeping to make my life better and happier.
Oh, what a critical point, hey?
And then the rest is what goes, right? And that blew my mind. so to speak. And from there, I mean, when I work with clients now, there are things, that North Americans do, that because this book was written with the Japanese culture in mind, a lot of it. And we here in Canada do not live in tiny apartments for the family of 5, or, so there are different just cultural differences that we need to implement and take into account when working with clients here. So I definitely throw in my own spin on things where I see fit. I also, Marie doesn't talk much about working with children. And having myself been a teacher and having a master's of education in child psychology, I work with children a lot. So I thought, well, why don't I create a program that's targeted towards working with children? And so that's when I created the Moose Method. And so I implement Marie's style of work in combination with my own. And it's basically whatever the client wants, because there's no one right answer for everyone. And I think if anyone reads her book and is expecting it like to be 100% going to fix their life, that's not really how this works. There are bits that you pull out that work for you, and that's when it's going to be most successful.
And don't you find that, like many other areas of change or growth, it's doing what you can sustain as far as what the routines are around that?
Correct. But what I will say, and when I say taking bits and pieces, I don't mean only doing half the categories and hoping the rest of your life is going to work out. I'm saying, in order for this to be successful, you have to do all of the categories in total, in full. And so those categories are working on clothing first, then books and papers, then kimono, which is the miscellaneous items. So things like kitchen area, sporting goods, that kind of thing. And then sentimental items, finally. Doing them, all of those categories in that order are very vital to making sure that this system isn't just a 1-week fix. What I see happen is if someone wants to do just clothing and they're like, no, I'm fine, and they don't do all the categories, they end up falling back into old routines. So I will say doing all of them is very important. What I'm saying when I talk about not doing every little thing, what I mean by that is, for myself personally, the whole emptying the purse at the end of every day, she talks about that in her book. I don't do that because I just don't have time. But I do it at the end of every week, so it does get done. But that's kind of my thing. And I don't carry a big purse. I carry a tiny bag, because I know if I have a big purse, I'll fill it with stuff that I don't need. So I learned very quickly to get rid of all my big purses, because that was doing me no favors in life. But I'm talking about little things like that. There are little approaches that may or may not work for some people, and some that will work worlds ahead of others for different things, if that makes sense.
It does. Now, is there a reason why sentimental items are last?
Definitely, because if you started with sentimental items, you would hit an emotional wall immediately and just not want to do anything else. Just think about those times when you're going through your closet and you find an old photo album. Well, good luck. The rest of your day is done, because you're now flipping through that photo album. You're either crying or smiling or going through this whirlwind of emotions. And if you started with that instead of doing something as easy as clothing that already has a large turnover, then you are in for not a fun trip. I will tell you that right away, especially if there's been some sort of tragic event in your family. For example, my mom passed away. If I tried starting off with all my mother's belongings, good luck. This would not have gone well at all. And I know that for sure.
It seems to me there's a certain level of discernment that is getting cultivated through the entire process. I've watched a few of the tidying up episodes on Netflix, first as a bit of a joke, to be honest, but then there were a few things that I found super interesting, just based on my perspective of growth and change, and I saw that this practice of discernment is critical to the clearing of the clutter and the possessions. And so I guess what it is that if you're starting with clothes, like you said, that have a higher turn rate anyways, it's easier
Yes.
And so it's like a muscle, like that muscle discernment that strengthens over time.
Right. Exactly.
And then you get to practice before taking on the emotionally charged stuff.
And even like with something like books and papers, we don't start that first either, because that's a different kind of heavy. Looking at your tax papers and all that, that's not emotional, but it's not fun, but it does need to get done. So those things, that's why that one is second with the books as well. So there is a method to the madness, and if done properly, it is. I can attest. Like, I'm not saying that someone once called me one of her disciples, and I kind of took offense to that, because I'm religious, like I'm Catholic, and I thought, well, that's a bit much, but also because like it's something that works. So it does. I'm not saying that it's going to solve all of life's problems and that it's perfection. This woman should be put on a pedestal. I'm saying that this method works. Read the book and implement what you need to in your life to make your life better. That's about as far as it goes for me. I'm not someone who's going to say this is the be all end all, but I can vouch for someone who started off at such a low spot in her life to where I am now running my own business. A lot of it was attributed to this one book and this process of compiling different methods that work for organization. And most importantly, I would say practicing gratitude, because a lot of this book talks about thanking your items before you discard them. So practicing gratitude, so being grateful for what we have in our lives and not always wanting more. That is what a lot of stress in our life is attributed to, is always wanting the next best thing and not worrying about all the things we have right now. And, when you're practicing gratitude, you can't be in another state. You can't be angry, sad, wanting for more. You can only be in the state of, I am here now in this moment, and I am grateful for all that is around me, for all that I have and all that I am. And that is something that can take you anywhere you want to go, I would say.
And it's taking you, like, having that gratitude has you present to your current state, right? Like your current, what you have right now.
Correct.
Right down to, if I was practicing gratitude right now, I would be thinking about how grateful I am to be having this conversation with you, not about the 18 different things that I need to get done before I make dinner this evening.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of backing our way into mindfulness around all of this stuff.
Yes, 1000%.
Yeah. So let's riff on that for a little bit. And what I was thinking about while I was listening to you was that when you are going through this system that sort of graduates you from the more easily discardable, although I bet you all people probably get stuck in clothes, and then or paper. But these are also signs of potential mental health issues too. And
yes, very much so.
I bring that forward because of where the conversation started, but also you've reminded me of some of the patterns in my family around paperwork. I'll be specific, around my father, around paperwork and taxes and things like that getting out of hand. It was both a consequence and a symptom of some very severe mental health challenges.
I see that a lot.
Yeah, it becomes overwhelming even in and of itself. So it becomes its own thing.
It's funny that you say your father, because my father also, my mother was the notoriously tidy one, to the point where when we vacuumed our carpet, we had to make sure that those lines were straight. The vacuum lines that you see it was that extreme in our house. But if my father is on the opposite spectrum of loving collecting magazines, paperwork, all of these things. And when my mother passed away 5 years ago, she passed away of breast cancer. I knew she did a lot in the house, obviously. I didn't realize how much until she was gone. And I'll go home and visit my father, and I see the accumulation of things. And I know that it has mental health, or lack thereof, I guess, implications, because a lot of it is, just holding on to something because he couldn't hold on to the one thing he wanted. And that was my mother, so it's, I'm going to keep the other things that make me happy because I can. But that's a slippery slope to go down.
Yeah. It's like control and fear operating at the same time, or lack of control.
Well, exactly. And it is, like I've said, it is a weight that is put on you, because now it's like a mental and physical blocker. These things do add up. They take up space, and you're sitting amongst all this stuff all the time. And that's going to have implications on your health, both mental and otherwise.
One of the thoughts I have on this is that we all have a certain amount of energy to manage. And some days we may have more, some days we have less, but the stuff that's hanging around, you might just think of it as an extra water bottle or two, or an extra book or two. And trust me, I love books. Anyone who's seen the inside of my office knows there's half of what there were behind me, but it's that comfort that things bring, but at the same time, they are distracting you from a clean, clutter-free mental state as well. So if we think of it as everything has energy, and it's either giving you energy or taking it away, I find that a very an easy way to explain this dynamic to people. How does that relate to what you see when you're in people's homes, which is a very intimate experience, and you're helping them to discern what they're going to keep that's going to make them feel good and spark joy, to coin the phrase. And then as they're letting go of things that they may or may not feel attachment to.
One of the things that I love about working with all my clients is that every client is different. And within the first 10 minutes, I can tell what their spark joy items are, just by the energy of, how they feel when they're around them. I can tell. I don't know if the viewers or the listeners right now can see your books, but I can see them, and they're put on a shelf, and they're very beautifully organized with colors and just the image of that. And when you were talking about it, your face lit up, and that's a spark joy item for you. For me, books are, a sense of information. And when I read a book, I've either, absorbed the information or I haven't. Regardless, the book kind of goes. My book collection is down to 10. Or I think I even got rid of a few the other day. So it's less than 10. But the ones that I kept, I read over and over. It's not a joy thing. It's more of I need to refer back to this. They're mostly business books. And I have one spark joy book, and it's Charlotte's Web from when I was a child. But for me, that's a different energy. I have some clients who, when you talk books, they would love to have floor to ceiling, all full walls of books. And that's okay, because that's their joy. But as soon as I see that these items are weighing someone down and not lifting them up, that's when they need to go. Because you might think you like books, but when you walk into a certain room that has books piled up, just on the floor and things like that, I'm sorry to say, that's not a love of books. If you love books, you would be displaying them like you are in your office over there. A love of books is not, 10 under the bed, some on the top of the toilet, some in the shower, some under a couch. That's not proving to me that you love books. That is more of a, I don't want to label this as like a mental health thing, but as there's a trigger there. There's something that you're holding on to that isn't the book itself, and we need to get to the bottom of that. I don't know if that makes sense.
It 100% does. And I think you've earned the right through your experience to talk about mental health issues, by the way. So we can take that here. So when you were talking, I was thinking it's not the books in that case. And I love the way that you put that so succinctly, because I do hear what you're saying about the display. And to be honest, I just redid this office over the Christmas holidays because it was getting out of control. We live in a small city house. I work from the home, and ironically, I let go of some of the books that I had been holding on to for 22 years since I left teaching, some of my favorites. And so I was keeping them with sentimental attachment. And then I was like, okay, but really, are they serving me now in this space? And who can I pass them on to that might be able to get the same amount of joy that I used to using them with the kids?
That's exactly it. It's about passing it along to someone for whom it can bring more joy than you're feeling now. And isn't that a wonderful feeling? Even as you were talking about that, your face lit up, talking about passing along that joy. So it's not to negate that it brought you joy at one point, and it's not going to take the memories away. And that's one of the things that I love to explain to my clients, just because you're giving these books away doesn't mean that experience didn't happen. Or when we're going down the sentimental road, I realize I now have a small drawer of my mother's belongings that I kept, but I realized one day it was as if I just woke up and thought, why do we still have her full closets 2 years later of her clothes? My mother was someone who gave back to the community and to the poor, and this was her life's work all the time. So why are we holding on to clothes that aren't going to bring her back? Because they're not, and they're not going to make us forget about her if we do give them away. And we gave them away to Salvation Army because she did a lot of work with the Salvation Army as a teacher. She was also a teacher in a poorer school. And it was that was what those clothes needed to do, to bring someone else joy. And that was, in a way, not us letting go of our mother, but of letting go of the stuff that we didn't need to hang on to.
That's beautiful. When I was clearing out the office with the double or more volume of books, what's here right now, I was taking them to a bookstore down in the east end of the city that takes and resells and shares. I was giving some away, but there were just too many to keep doing that. I would have worn out and stopped. Well, when they saw me coming, or me and my husband coming with carrying these boxes of books, they were, and I would walk across the street to the Indigo store just to go and see what's new. I was like, holy crap, I just gave those books over there. They're still on the shelf. No wonder they were happy. But it really was. And I felt really good about that, not just from the point of view of the unloading and the passing along, and even some of it was unburdening, but I also was indirectly, like I wasn't bringing them to a church basement or to a giveaway, but I was helping a local small business.
Also true. Yeah. I've never even thought about it that way. I help my clients, drop things off, but I'm saying I thought of it as, giving back. I never, in the 3 years that I've been doing this job, I've never thought of it as I am helping a local business. Mm-hmm. So you've just opened my eyes to that, because, it's very true.
Yeah. And that means a lot to me, because I mean, my clients many of them are local business. So it's this full circle flow of possessions and energy. And in the meantime, everybody's feeling lighter.
Yes.
That seems like a great place to kind of pick up the thread of mindfulness in this practice. I hope you don't mind that I keep referring back to the Netflix, but I think when people listen to us, I would love it if they either went and read that book. And I understand you have a book, so I'll have you tell us about that as well. And the fact that things like this are coming out on Netflix more and more is fantastic because of the reach. Before she starts working, Marie Kondo, she's like this tiny little sprite who goes into these people's home, and it looks like most or all of the homes are in California or Southern California. But she goes in, and before she starts working, she sits down or kneels down, and she does her own thing.
Yes.
What's that about? I have my assumptions, but this is a great opportunity for me to ask somebody who probably has some insight into it.
The story behind that is the gratitude that I was mentioning earlier. So what she does is she finds a space in the home, and we all do this when we go in. I don't do it as obviously as that. I don't stop the clients from, you know, telling me their story or whatever. We don't all take a moment together. Partially because I'm not a tiny Japanese woman, and culturally it would just look a little bizarre. Like even in the show, you can see they're uncomfortable, but there's a comfort level because she is Japanese. So they understand that there's something happening that is different from what they know. But if, let's say, I were to do that, you know, a tall, giant Catholic woman, it's a bit different because that's not how we practice things here in Canada. So I do it, just not as obviously as that. But sorry for that, going down that little rabbit hole there. But what she's doing is she is taking a moment to say thank you to the home for housing this family and for bringing them security and safety and allowing us, meaning her and the clients together, to work on finding their more joyous life together moving forward in this home. So it's along those lines. And she walks around, and the reason at the beginning she walks around and doesn't choose the same kind of spot every time is because she feels a certain energy in different areas of the room. And I have done this as well. I used to, when I started doing this, I would just take that moment before I knocked on the client's door. I would look at the home. I would stand on it. So anyone who has the Nest camera is watching me just stare at the door for a few minutes before I ring the doorbell. But I would stand and do it there. And now I do it kind of as we're working. Once I'm walking around the house, I can feel a certain energy in certain areas of the home. And I'll just pause there. And I will just take a few moments, you know, close my eyes so to not be disturbing to what is going on in the process. But a lot of us consultants, I can't speak to everyone to say that everyone does it, but I know a lot of us do practice that. Again, it's practicing gratitude and being in the moment.
And it seems like making it's a bit of a, and we'll be careful. We're both, in my background is Catholic as well, but so when I initially started bringing in the word ceremony and even to go further ritual into my coaching, it was uncomfortable at first. But this strikes me like this is a small ceremony that gets performed in order to set the space or move to the next level.
Correct. And it's not a religious thing. It's not she's not trying to push any of her beliefs onto anyone. Mm-hmm. It's literally like, no matter who you are in this world, whether you believe in God or whomever, or spirits or energy, or, you know, there are so many different beliefs that none of that matters. We should all be grateful for being here. No matter who you believe in the end. And this is, I've talked about this quite a lot because I'm very open about my Catholicism, and I'm very religious and spiritual person, but that is me. I don't know what happens when we die. So why am I going to argue with someone about it right now? I think I'm going to be very blunt here. I think that's the silliest thing to argue about religion. It's one of the silliest things I've ever heard. I'm a very strong believer in what I believe, but that does not mean that I'm going to treat someone else differently because they have a different belief. Because when we find out, we'll all be dead. And then it won't matter anymore. Again, that's very blunt, but you know, and
well, so it'll all be the same.
It'll all be the same. And at that point, it's not, you know, whatever happens. But I think the one thing that we should all have in common is that we should be grateful for that which we have been given, all of our blessings in this world. As I sit here in my closet, I'm just looking out into my room. It's kind of funny. I've never been in my closet before, but the sound in here was better. So I've never looked at my bedroom from this angle, but I'm sitting here looking and saying, you know, thank you that I have a bed that I can sleep on. Something that we take for granted every day. Thank you that I have a dresser to put my clothes in. Thank you for this plant that is purifying my air. Like it's little things that some people, these are luxuries that many in this world do not have. So we need to take the time to be grateful. And that has nothing to do with any sort of religion. It has to do with being human.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. I think having people listening and, you know, to almost point back to the other end of the spectrum where you and I both have experience with having, in my case, a depressed state, your case with full-blown depression. when the mind is out of control, those are the furthest thoughts away.
Mm-hmm.
And so bringing them in as a daily practice, it's to me, it's both edifying, and, they say, gratitude and sort of being in that energy of gratitude and the vibration around it is very positive, and the feeling, lifts us up, but it also enables us to be kinder and gentler on ourselves, kinder and more compassionate to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And like what you just said, those are all principles that are cross-cultural and cross religion. So at the end of the day, these when something really catches on like this, it's because it's finding a broader audience, and people are having lived experiences of it.
Yes. And it made me both happy and sad watching Marie Kondo do her, media tours afterwards. Because she's going on all the late shows where, their job is to poke fun at things. I get it.
Mm.
But in the moments where she was saying, like, doing the closing of your eyes, practicing gratitude, thanking the space, people were going to town on this with the humor. And at first it was funny. And then I realized, isn't it sad that for us to be grateful for the things that we have, we find that to be embarrassing and humorous. And that is what our society has become. Instead of just embracing it and saying, you know what? Yes, thank you that I'm a TV show host and I've got my dream job and I'm loving what I'm doing and I have the world at my fingertips. Instead, it's like, let's laugh about it because this is my God-given right. and like I said, their job is to make fun of things. That's what they do. But I'm just using those as an example because she's been poked fun a lot for this particular practice. But it's just funny to me that a lot of us feel uncomfortable at the thought of being grateful for things in the moment. And it's something that I won't lie. The first time I read the book and it said, thank your shirts, I giggled. But my mindset has completely changed once I started to do it. And now I don't shop as much because I realized, well, I already have things. I did a year of no shopping last year, not shopping at all.
Oh, I was hoping this would come up.
Oh, that was life-changing because I realized how much I actually had and I got rid of more than I ever have. And there was nothing coming in. And it really, really made me appreciate the things that I own, especially in this city. We live in Toronto. The amount of homeless people in this city is very high and it's very sad. And it breaks my heart now when I walk by one of them on the street. Like I will collect things from clients that may not make it to donations, and I'll walk around and I'll give it to the people on the streets of Toronto because, the donation place won't take it because it has a hole, but you know how grateful the person who's only has one t-shirt living on the street is going to be for this item. And it really puts things in perspective that we can live in the same city as someone who sleeps on a sidewalk and go back to our homes and think that practicing gratitude is a silly concept.
For someone who's heard that you didn't buy anything for a year and finds that shocking or extreme, what was that like? Was it hard?
Yes, at first it was very difficult because, like I said, I was an emotional shopper. Even though I started on the minimalism road, once I started doing this whole Marie Kondo thing, and I should side note that the Marie Kondo, the KonMari method is not a minimalistic approach. I just combined it. I took it to the next level. So I just want to be clear on that so that people aren't thinking that reading her book is going to make them minimalists, living in a tiny house in a field somewhere. That's not what the purpose of that is. But just for me personally, I took it to the level of minimalism. So then in year 2 of doing this job and going into homes and seeing just the excess of that everyone has, myself included, this is not a judgment. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Toronto, and I fill up all the space with my stuff, which is silly because I'm one person. And I always use like the purse analogy. The bigger the purse, the more stuff will stuff in it. Just like the bigger the home. You have a large home, you're going to fill it just because it's the nature of the beast. I have a larger apartment than I've usually had, so I've been filling it. So when I had a chance to look around, I thought, okay, Ivanka, no more consuming. You have more than enough, like way more than enough. I think at the time I had over 100 pairs of shoes for one person. And so I thought, I'm going to try to do, in my mind, I said, I'm going to try. I'm using the air quotes right now, but you can't see me doing it. But I'm going to try and see how far I can go. The first month was a little bit difficult. I said, I can't go to the mall at all. Don't do it because the temptation is there and you have zero willpower. This is not a smart idea. But to be completely honest, the longer it went on, the less I wanted to shop. It's now been over a year because it's now April. I did this from January to January, the whole 2018. And when I go into a mall, I actually, and this is not a phrase of judgment, but I get disgusted walking through a mall, watching people rifling through racks and piles of clothes and walking with tons of bags. And it actually has this weird physical effect on me where I almost have an anxiety attack watching this.
Well, you're incompatible with it.
And yeah, it's as if I've become allergic now. I think since my year of no shopping has come up, the only thing I purchased a dress for something that an event I had to go to, and I purchased a fanny pack for work because I found that I didn't have enough pockets for like my screwdriver and all the little things I needed when I'm working with clients. So those are the only two things I've purchased, and those were things that I needed for what I was doing. And the dress I actually didn't end up wearing. I returned it because I realized I have dresses. What am I doing? But it's completely changed my mindset on consumerism. And not only that, just talking about the environmental impacts. I've now gone down this environmental kick. I was always, a bit of a tree hugger in the sense, but not to this extreme. And this year of no shopping really opened my eyes to the environmental impacts that the clothing industry has on our environment. It just makes me so sad to see what we are doing to our environment because of fast fashion alone.
It sounds to me like this entire journey has been one of become one of self-awareness, but now has broadened out to more societal and global awareness.
It definitely has. And these are all things that I wouldn't have expected in a million years.
Maybe that's what happens to us when we stop letting our stuff to be in charge.
Right. And when you let go of something, you're making room for something else. I didn't realize that the something else that was coming in was far greater than tangible items, physical belongings. It was a feeling, and is continuously being this feeling of, I don't even know how to say it, of just spiritual awareness of who I am in the sense of me as a human. And you can get like the scientific, it doesn't have to be spiritual in the religious sense. I mean, in the scientific, like I am a living being on earth. What do I need to survive? And what are all these other things and why are they here? They're literally building walls around the things that I need to survive. If you're a visual person like myself, picture yourself in a field and you have like air coming towards you, you have proper health coming towards you, you have all these things that you need to survive coming towards you, and you've built up a wall of shoes or a pile of clothes that is blocking these things from getting in and preventing you from living your best life. And then you start removing these things and you're making room for things like love and proper health, eating habits. My gosh, the amount of clients who have told me that their eating habits changed after doing the decluttering festival, we call it. It's mind-blowing because the two really don't have anything to do with one another if you think about it, but they actually do very much so, because now you have time to cook better meals, healthier meals. Your shopping habits have changed for groceries as well. You couldn't maybe afford that $6 pineapple or whatever before, but you bought 10 bags of chips that were $4 a piece. Like, well, wait a second, let's let's revisit what we're spending our money on and make better choices.
Well, and that's what happens when principles that work, they tend to transfer and well beyond environments, just like, to former teachers talking on a podcast, the skills that we had and brought to and then developed in the classroom and through that education journey transferred, I'm assuming in both cases, very well to business and life. And obviously, I mean, I remember back when I made that big change in my life, I had a lot to learn yet, but it was all about transferable skills and changing one environment at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that just for a moment to come full circle on this, because I think as a lot of people who listen to this podcast will be business owners or leaders in business. When you left teaching, for me, it's a long time ago now, but the reason that I left wasn't about teaching and it wasn't about the kids. It was about timing and the economy and the availability of jobs for, at that time, a primary junior teacher, and there was surplus.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful for it now, although that's when I had one of my depressive episodes, was that anything that I was trying to do just wasn't working in that environment, and none of it was in my control.
Yeah.
But it taught me that I do not thrive in a union environment that's tightly controlled by the government in certain cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you had a somewhat similar experience. So I'd love to talk about that, because I think there's probably something very relevant in our current climate to explore.
Yes, very much so, sadly. So I graduated from Teachers College in 2010. And then there were absolutely no jobs. Like, good luck even thinking about it. People thought, why are you going into school to do this? There are no jobs for you. But I did it because I don't like people telling me what to do. It was almost out of spite in a way. I was a photographer before that. So I had graduated from photography and was doing photography for 7 years. So then I went into teaching, and I graduated, and like people warned me, there were no jobs. And so I went and taught in the UK for a year because that was the only thing I could get. That was partially also because Will and Kate happened to be getting married that month. And my parents, I said, I want to go to the royal wedding. My parents said, get a job. So I got a job so I can go to the royal wedding.
That's great.
I combined the two. But from there, I worked a year there, and then I came home. My mother was ill at the time. That was when she got diagnosed with breast cancer. So I came home thinking, okay, I'll try again. I'll try to get a job in Ontario again. No luck. Saskatchewan called me. Hey, do you want to come out here and work? Because I speak Ukrainian. Ukrainian was my first language, and they have a lot of Ukrainian programs out there. So they said, we're looking for a Ukrainian teacher. Would you be interested? I did not want to go. My mother, like I said, my mother was ill. It was not looking good. I said, I don't want to leave. And my mother said, you need a job. She was so excited. My grandmother was born in Saskatchewan, and there were all these little signs that were kind of saying, go out there. And I said, I've never, what? Why am I going out to Saskatchewan? I just want to be here. But she was so excited. I did it. I went and I did that. There are politics in the classroom everywhere you go. I learned that very quickly. No matter where you are, like you said, it's not about the kids. I love the kids, and I would do that any day. Even what are quote unquote the worst kids were my favorite, because it was, no kid is a bad kid. It's their surroundings that make them who they are. So kind of tackling those challenges were why I was doing what I was doing. And the politics got too much. So much so that was when I attempted suicide. Yeah. And I know, looking back now, people say, well, what were you thinking? You were a teacher. You had a classroom full of kids. Your mother was dying. You had 2 little nieces and an older niece and nephew. Like, you're so selfish. And all I can say is, in those moments, your mind is not your own. Your thoughts are not your own, because looking back, I can see why people would say that. But when you're in those moments of nothing I'm doing is working for my life. It's like I kind of equate it to a paraplegic. I'm sending the message to my brain for my limbs to move, but they're not moving. Kind of the same kind of thing. So I was working as hard as I could work, and it wasn't enough. And the principals were telling me I need to work harder. I need to be coaching more sports. I need to be working basically 20-hour days, which calculated to like 13 cents an hour, and you're never doing enough. And, you have 33 kids in a classroom, 4 of whom are autistic, 1 of them with Down syndrome, 10 who can't read above a grade 4 level, and you're teaching grade 7, 8, like all of these things with no support. There were a lot of other factors, but in short, this was what kind of drove me over the edge. And my mom passed away, and I came home, and I moved home. And again, in Ontario, thinking, okay, it's going to be different. Try to get a job now. You can do it. Like you have experience now under your belt. You can do it. Still nothing. And I had stayed home with my dad for about 6 months to kind of help around the house and make sure that his life was his world just turned upside down. He knew my mother since 6th grade. So they had a strong bond. And I thought, I want to be here to be with my family and not alone during this difficult time. And the government and the teaching and all that just didn't allow for that. So I moved out to Alberta. And again, it was just the same kind of thing over and over. Loved the kids. I would take a bullet for those kids any day of the week. Gratefully, we live in a country that you don't have to do that. But, it was just, I was losing the joy in what I was doing because everything else was sucking it out of me. And now I found this way of being able to work with children and teach adults too, a way to make their lives happier and implement systems in their daily life. And so I'm teaching, but I'm doing it on my own terms. And it hasn't been easy. I don't have my dental benefits anymore. I went to the dentist the other day. I almost cried because I said, I'm sorry, it's how much? Little things you take for granted when you don't realize. But there are challenges. There's no question. There are going to be challenges in every aspect of your life, but it's how you learn to deal with those challenges. And I'm happier now than I've ever been, even with these challenges. So I would say, if you're someone who's looking to make a change, to find something, live every day doing something you love, figure out a way to make it work. There are going to be ups and downs, but there are ups and downs in everything. So this time it's on your terms.
Well, and the freedom of making that decision when it sounds like we both experienced that very similarly, where in an institution like education, as much as it's about the kids and about the individual, it's not about you as a teacher. And there's certain cycles that make teachers into commodities. And we both hit it at the same time.
Yes.
Right. So when you're in that position where you're a commodity and not a valued professional, then you do have choice. And it's not, I'm the first one to say the idea of overnight success is largely a myth. We're sold on that as much as the myth that we need to buy and accumulate and always be spending and chase fame and and on and on and on. But there's a journey here, and it's very clear now when you say that you're meant to be doing what you're doing. And there's a certain ease and flow that comes in when you get yourself on your path.
Yes, I would agree 100%.
Well, Ivanka, I feel like we could talk the rest of the day away. And I'm so excited to share this conversation with the audience and to share it and you around. I want to thank you very, very much for coming on here to share your stories, to share your experience, to share your accumulated wisdom, and to also bring some very practical ideas and solutions to the table.
It was my pleasure. Thank you again for bringing me on into your beautiful office with your colorful books.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening.
If you've received benefit from this conversation and you would like to reach Ivanka, she can be found online at tidymoose.com and on Instagram and Facebook at The Tidy Moose. She also has a children's book called The Tidy Moose and an ebook for adults, Declutter Your Way to Health, Wealth, and Freedom. I've left links to all of these things in the show notes. And as with every time a serious topic of mental health comes up on the podcast, you'll find links to resources should you need immediate assistance. Thank you for listening to Free Your Inner Guru. I know you have a lot of choice where you receive your inspiration and information. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you would take a few extra seconds for 3 quick things. First, if there's an idea or story that you know would make a difference in someone else's life, follow the link in the show notes back to our website where you can easily share it with them. Second, subscribe so that you can be part of the ongoing conversation on whatever app or website you're listening on. Big conversations become the catalyst for meaningful change. If you happen to be listening on iTunes, please take a few moments to leave a rating and a review. The last thing I'll leave you with is that we are building a community of conscious leaders to engage in big conversations and support the Free Your Inner Guru podcast. To find out more, visit patreon.com/freeyourinnerguru or support.freeyourinnerguru.com. Until next time, I'm Laura Tucker, signing off for Free Your Inner Guru.